What's up, hello, my name is Emma, and today I'm going to be doing an anti-book haul. Anti-hauls originated in the beauty community, I believe, but I've seen a few different booktubers do it, and it essentially is all about books or products that you are not interested in, therefore you will not be buying. But rather than talk about books I haven't read and don't plan to read, I thought it would be much more interesting if I were to share some books that I have actually read but don't plan on purchasing for my personal book collection. I am the type of person who enjoys owning books, and while I really have no strict rules about buying a book before I have read it, buying a book after I have read it from someplace else, whether it is my library, if I listen to the audio version, or if I was sent a free unfinished copy from the publisher, buying it after I've read it is like a really big deal. So here are some books I've read but didn't like enough to add to my personal library. Now, back in 2014, when I first really started reading again, I almost exclusively would read books through the library and then later purchase my own copies if it was something I enjoyed. But one of the first series I did not buy after reading was Matched by Ali Kandi. So back then, I had this mindset where I would always want to finish a series in completion before really forming my opinion on it and deciding if I liked it or not, which was a total waste of time. Like, there's no sense reading a series that you don't really like just to find out you don't like it in the end. I don't even really know what the Match series was about after all these years. It was a dystopian. There was a love triangle. That's all there was. One of the things I absolutely hated about this series was how each book kept adding more perspectives. If you've been watching my channel since like 2015, you would know I used to really have a thing against multiple perspectives. I always wanted to read about just one character and their point of view. So whenever a book like started out that way and then the subsequent books added in more perspectives, it was like my biggest pet peeve. Mind you, now I can read a book with like 5 perspectives and think it's awesome, but at the time, that third perspective in the third book was just like my breaking point. So I read all 3 books. I did not like any of them, and I think I liked each book even less. It wasn't unique, it wasn't entertaining, it was just a total bore. Next is another series I read around the same time, same situation, where I read all the books from the library and just did not like them enough to purchase after, is The Summer I Turned Pretty series by Jenny Han. This almost feels like an old school YA classic. I feel like anyone who is interested in YA between like 2010 and 2014 had read this series. I read all 3 books to like really give it a chance, and I think I gave them all like 2 stars or 3 stars, which was like a 1 star for me back then because I was very easy to please. It was about a girl who is involved in a love triangle with 2 brothers, one who is like soft and sweet and the other one who's like hard and brooding. Like, could you get more generic? It was very boring, bland, had no sustenance. Luckily, I really enjoyed the To All the Boys I've Loved Before series by Jenny Han, which I read afterwards, but The Summer I Turned Pretty was just like one of those books that I will always revert back to as really not enjoying my time reading. Next up on my anti-haul is There's Someone Inside of Your House by Stephanie Perkins. This is a book that I did own a physical copy of. I had picked up the advanced reader copy at Book Expo that year, but I never purchased it. I was really excited about this book because Stephanie Perkins is obviously the author of the Anna and the French Kiss series, which I had really enjoyed as a teen. And so this was going to be not only the first book I had read from her since finishing that series, but also it was like a YA slasher horror novel, which is something that was totally new to me at the time. And it was okay. Like, I think I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't dismal, but it was just very disappointing. I liked what it was trying to do, but the execution of it just didn't pay off for me. I really liked the atmosphere of the novel. It definitely upheld that like cheesy, corny Halloween slasher movie flick. It dealt with some interesting topics, like it was very sex positive, it touched on hazing, and it had a little bit more of a diverse cast than her previous books. So I'm reading my Goodreads review to like get back some of my thoughts on this story, and I wrote, I mean, there's one scene that's supposed to be really serious, full of suspense and danger, but I couldn't stop laughing at the ridiculous fact that one character was naked. I ended up missing a crucial plot point until I reread the scene. It had a lot of that, which was weird, and I was very tired of all the ways that they were trying to allude to Makani's mysterious past. She was just like always talking about how she was afraid people knew and like what would happen if they found out. And I was like, we get it. You're hiding a secret. That's going to make sense at the end of the story. So not the worst book I've ever read, but definitely not the best. Next up on my anti-haul, we have a book that I would consider myself to have mostly enjoyed, but it's just not one that I feel strongly enough about that I need to own my own copy, and that is Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabby Rivera. So I had listened to the audiobook version of this book because I was looking for more fiction that has to do with feminist themes, and Juliet Takes a Breath is a great example of that. So I have and will continue to recommend Juliet Takes a Breath to anyone who's looking for more feminist fiction, especially if you're looking for intersectional themes, learning about queer women of color, what their experience is, and the like. It's a great book full of a lot of information on that. The story itself just didn't do it for me. First off, the writing style was just a little bit too casual for my taste. I've developed this thing where I don't always love a book that is written in a super conversational way where it is like the exact language that the person would use if they were speaking out loud. I definitely prefer a bit of a more flowery, eloquent prose, so that's just something that I didn't really vibe with on this book. And honestly, the other main reason why I didn't like it is because there was just a very grating character who was actually supposed to be the worst and make you hate her, but like just because the author executed that well doesn't mean that I liked the story. I was just tired of her bullshit throughout the entire story, and while like the whole point of her character is so that the protagonist can grow, I just don't even feel like this character got what she deserved in the end, and more of her things should have been challenged. The novel has some really great themes of feminism, identity, coming of age, learning to challenge your belief and finding where you really belong. But the overall story just didn't do it for me. It was not memorable enough that I'd want to own a copy, but I'm always happy to recommend it to people who are looking for that type of story. Next up on the list of books I have read but won't be buying, we have a book that I feel is like a global phenomenon at this point, and that is Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. This is another book that I like mostly enjoyed. Like if I was gifted this book, I would keep it and enjoy it and be happy I have it, but I'm just not motivated enough to put down the money to buy my own copy. This is a book that I had listened to on audio through my local library, and I actually really enjoyed the audio version because it is narrated by the author. And I also really liked the writing style. Like Elizabeth Gilbert is one of those people that I feel was just like meant to be an author, and that totally came through in the book. And I really did like all the stories and anecdotes about her experience traveling the world for a year and using that time to really find herself, but I just didn't feel more for the book beyond that. This is a book that is like known for changing lives and has made people find the person they truly are, and I just did not have that experience. Honestly, it was kind of like watching a YouTube video. Like I got to follow this person traveling and see their experiences, and it was interesting and I liked the insight that came from it, but like I'm good to just close the book and move on after. So it's another book I did like. It's just not one that I feel super compelled to own. Next up on my anti-haul, I have one that I feel might get some people a little riled up and upset, and that is Dear Evan Hansen, the novel, which I believe was written by Val Emmett. If you don't know, Dear Evan Hansen is like a Tony Award-winning musical. People love it, and earlier, I believe this year or the year before, they had published a novel version of the story. I want to be clear, my thoughts on the book are not my thoughts on the musical. I don't really know anything about the musical. I've never seen it. I've never listened to the soundtrack. And so I've heard that there are like significant differences between the two. So although I didn't really like the book, that doesn't mean that I'm saying the musical is the same. I know we've got some diehard fans here. So with Dear Evan Hansen, the main thing I didn't like about this book is I was kind of upset by how the topic of suicide was handled. The whole point of the story is this boy, Evan Hansen, like gets wrapped up in this boy who recently died of suicide, and he starts convincing everyone that he knew them and they were like best friends. And while I think this book did a great job exploring anxiety from Evan's perspective, I was just kind of really off-put by the way that like Evan takes every ounce of autonomy away from this person and is like changing the narrative of what his life was like. And so it just really like put a bad taste in my mouth throughout the entire series. And at the end, I just felt there wasn't a strong enough message about like why this was bad and that the characters didn't face enough retribution for it. A few other small things I didn't really enjoy about the book is while I mostly liked Evan as a character like in the beginning and I gained more problems with him at the end, he was pretty well rounded, but the rest of the cast and all of the side characters were super underdeveloped. And what I liked in the beginning of the story is that I didn't know it was told from two perspectives. I thought the whole book was from Evan, but we get the voice of another character, but that also was not executed well. Like, they weren't balanced, so we barely got any of the second character, and it just sort of like fell off at the end, and I didn't really like the way it turned out. I thought it would have been great, but it wasn't. I know the story of Dear Evan Hansen is one that means so much to a lot of people, so while I didn't really enjoy the novelization of this story, I'd totally be open to actually seeing the musical performed. Like, if I got like free or discounted tickets, I would be all in for giving it a totally open chance. And so the final book on my anti-book haul is Grim Lovelyz by Megan Shepherd. Now, this is an interesting one because this is actually a book that I was not only sent for free by the publisher, but I was actually paid to promote. So if you don't have a lot of experience with the sponsorship aspect of BookTube, a lot of times a publisher won't pay you to review a book and share your thoughts in it. They just want you to mention it and share it with your audience so that those who are interested will go out and buy it. So while I was not required to actually read Grim Lovelyz while I was doing that promotion, I did read it at the conclusion of those videos because it was something I was genuinely interested in and I wanted to wait until like spooky season to read this paranormal fantasy. It really seemed like the perfect book for me and I was very excited for it. But after reading, it just did not give the impression I wanted. It had like this super strong concept with a complex magical system and world and history, but the depth just wasn't there while reading. The characters were pretty shallow except for like the one main character again, which is always a pet peeve of mine. YA authors really need to learn that like if your romance does not have a ton of chemistry, there's no point in writing it. I thought this book had so much potential and I was so ready to consider it like a fantasy fave that I couldn't wait to recommend to you guys. But things just don't always turn out the way you expect. And also one of the most disappointing things about this book is that throughout the story, I was really praising the fact that it had some LGBT rep, which is harder to come across in fantasy. Like there was a gay character and a trans character. And then at the end, it just falls into the bury your gays trope. And I'm like, what was the point? So that was my anti-book haul. I really hope you guys enjoyed. In the comments below, let me know about some titles that are on your anti-haul list that you have read from either the library or borrowed from a friend and you just have no intention of ever owning them yourselves. But that is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching and I'll see you soon for a new one. Bye!